Captain Elena Vasquez pressed her palm against the cold metal of the airlock door, feeling the subtle vibrations of the alien vessel through the hull of her ship. The reconnaissance mission to the outer rim had taken an unexpected turn when they encountered the massive crystalline structure drifting in the void between star systems. What appeared to be a derelict alien vessel turned out to be very much alive and very much occupied. "Ma'am, we're getting interference patterns that suggest active shielding," reported Lieutenant Chen from his position at the sensor array. His voice carried the tension that had gripped the entire crew since they'd made first contact with the alien intelligence 3 hours ago. "Whatever's in there doesn't want us scanning too deeply." Elena nodded grimly. The initial communication had been brief and hostile. A voice speaking accented but fluent English had demanded they identify themselves and state their business in sovereign territory. When Elena had explained they were explorers from Earth conducting peaceful reconnaissance, the response had been a cold laugh, followed by weapons locks engaging on their ship. "Captain, incoming transmission," announced Communications Officer Rodriguez. The main screen flickered to life, revealing a figure that made Elena's breath catch in her throat. The being before them was undeniably female in form, but any resemblance to humanity ended. Her skin held an iridescent quality that shifted between deep purple and silver, depending on how the light struck it. Elaborate patterns that looked almost like circuitry traced along her neck and the visible portions of her arms. Her eyes were the most striking feature, completely black except for rings of brilliant blue that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. Crown-like protrusions emerged from her skull, giving her an unmistakably regal appearance. But it was her expression that sent chills down Elena's spine. "Pure, un dilute drage." Human vessel. The alien queen spoke, her voice carrying harmonics that made the speakers crackle. "I am Queen Zephyra of the Nexary Empire. You have violated sacred space and trespassed upon territory that has been ours for 10,000 of your years." She leaned forward, her alien features contorting with fury. "You chose the wrong path, human trespasser." Elena stepped forward, keeping her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Your Majesty, I am Captain Elena Vasquez of the Earth ship Prometheus. We had no knowledge of your territorial claims. Our maps show this region as uncharted space. We apologize for any silence." The Queen's roar reverberated through the communication channel. "Your ignorance is not absolution. The Nexary have marked these stars since before your species learned to make fire. We have watched your kind spread like a plague across the galaxy, consuming resources, destroying ecosystems, leaving nothing but ash and regret in your wake." The accusation stung, particularly because Elena knew there was truth to it. Humanity's expansion into space had not always been as careful or considerate as it should have been. Several colonies had been established with little regard for existing ecosystems, and more than one first contact scenario had gone badly due to human arrogance or misunderstanding. "Your Majesty, not all humans are the same," Elena replied carefully. "Our mission is one of exploration and scientific discovery. We seek to understand, not to conquer or destroy." Queen Zephyr's laugh was like breaking glass. "Pretty words from a pretty captain. But words are wind, and actions speak truth. Your ship carries weapons powerful enough to crack a moon. Your crew includes soldiers trained for planetary assault. Do you think us fools?" Elena felt her stomach sink. The Prometheus did indeed carry significant defensive armaments and a small contingent of colonial marines, standard for any deep space mission. But how could the aliens have scanned their ship so thoroughly when their own sensors could barely penetrate the alien vessel's hull? "Defensive measures only," Elena insisted. "Space is dangerous, as I'm sure you know. We've encountered pirates, hostile alien species, dangerous phenomena. We protect ourselves, but we are not aggressors. Tell that to the Kelthani," Zephyra snarled. "Tell that to the peaceful traders your military protected into extinction. Tell that to the crystal singers of Melodia Prime, whose homeworld now orbits a dead star thanks to human exploration." Elena's blood ran cold. The Kelthani incident had been classified at the highest levels. A first contact gone wrong, resulting in a brief but devastating conflict that had indeed led to the extinction of an entire species. The official records blamed a communication failure and defensive misunderstanding. Only a handful of people in the Earth government knew the real story, and Elena wasn't one of them. How did this alien queen know about classified human military actions? I can see the recognition in your eyes. Captain, Zephyra continued, her voice dropping to a menacing whisper. Yes, we know of your species' crimes. We know of your wars, your betrayals, your endless appetite for dominion. The Nexari have been watching humanity for far longer than you might imagine. Dr. Sarah Kim, the mission's xenobiologist, stepped up beside Elena. Your Majesty, if your people have been observing us, then you must also know that humanity has evolved. We've learned from our mistakes. The actions you describe happened decades ago, and they're not representative of who we are now. Zephyra's alien gaze fixed on the scientist with predatory intensity. Evolution? You speak of evolution while your species builds ever more powerful weapons, while your governments prepare for wars among yourselves over resources and territory. You call it evolution when 3 of your colonies declared independence last year, and your response was to blockade their food shipments until they submitted? Dr. Kim's face went pale. The colonial independence movements were another highly classified matter, one that most civilians had never heard about. The fact that this alien ruler knew about recent human political developments suggested a level of surveillance that was deeply troubling. How long have you been watching us? Elena asked quietly. Long enough, Zephyra replied. Long enough to see the pattern. Your species follows the same path as a dozen others we have encountered across the millennia. First comes curiosity and wonder, then expansion and confidence, finally, dominion and destruction. You are a young species still in the expansion phase, but already the signs of the final corruption are visible. Lieutenant Chen looked up from his console with alarm. Captain, we're being scanned by something far more sophisticated than anything in our databases. They're mapping our entire ship down to individual components. On the screen, Queen Zephyra smiled, revealing teeth that seemed to have been crafted from polished obsidian. Did you think our conversation was merely social, Captain? While you waste words trying to convince me of your species' worthiness, my technicians are learning everything about your vessel, your weapons, your crew, and your mission parameters. Elena felt a flash of anger. That's an act of war. Huh? Zephyra laughed again. Child, your entire species could not wage war against the Nexari. We are older than your star. We have conquered realities you cannot even conceive. What you call war, we call pest control. The bridge fell silent, except for the soft humming of ship systems and the occasional beep from monitoring equipment. Elena realized they were in far more danger than she had initially understood. This wasn't just a territorial dispute or a misunderstanding between species. This was a judgment, and humanity was on trial before a cosmic court that had already seen them guilty. What do you want from us? Elena asked finally. Justice, Zephyr replied simply. Your ship will be destroyed as a warning to your species. You will all die here in the cold dark between stars, and perhaps your deaths will serve as a lesson to those who would follow in your path. Wait, Elena said desperately. If you've been watching humanity for so long, then you must have seen some good as well. We're not perfect, but we're not monsters either. We've created art, music, literature. We've saved dying species, terraformed dead world in the gardens, built societies based on cooperation and mutual aid. Selective memory serves your argument, Captain, but it does not serve truth, Zephyr countered. For every species you claim to have saved, 2 others have died from your expansion. For every garden world you've created, 3 natural ecosystems have been strip-mined into wasteland. The mathematics of your existence is simple. Humanity takes more than it gives. Dr. Kim stepped forward again. Your Majesty, what if we could prove you wrong? What if we could show you that humans are capable of genuine positive change? Zephyr's eyes narrowed. Prove? How would you propose to prove anything from the confines of a doomed ship? Give us a chance, Elena interjected, seizing on Kim's idea. If you've been watching us for so long, you know we're capable of surprising you. Set us a challenge, a test. If we fail, you have our ship and our lives. If we succeed, perhaps you'll reconsider your judgment of our entire species. The alien queen was quiet for a long moment, her strange eyes seeming to look through them rather than at them. A test, she mused. How human of you to assume there's always a way to bargain, to negotiate, to find an alternative to consequences. There's always another choice, Elena replied firmly. That's what makes us human. Very well, Zephyr said after another pause. You speak of choices and change, and evolution. You will have the opportunity to demonstrate these qualities. But know this, Captain Vasquez. The test I will set for you has claimed the lives of crews from 17 different species over the past 3 millennia. None have succeeded. None have lived to see their homeworld again. Elena felt her crew's tension spike, but she kept her voice level. What's the test? You will dock with my vessel and come aboard, Zephyra explained. You and 4 of your crew will face the Labyrinth of Echoes, an ancient Nexary trial that reveals the true nature of those who enter it. The labyrinth will show you visions of your past, your possible futures, and the consequences of your choices. You must navigate these visions and reach the center chamber while maintaining your sanity, your identity, and your moral compass. And if we succeed, Dr. Kim asked, if you succeed, your ship will be free to go, and I will consider postponing judgment on your species until I can observe them further. Zephyra's expression suggested she didn't believe this was a possibility. If you fail, as all others have failed, your ship will be destroyed, and your species will be marked for eventual extinction. Elena looked around at her crew. Lieutenant Chen looked pale, but determined. Dr. Kim was already taking notes, her scientific curiosity overriding her fear. Rodriguez was running calculations on his console, probably trying to determine their odds of fighting their way out instead. The Marines, standing guard at the bridge, in trance, looked ready for anything. How do we know you'll honor the agreement if we succeed? Elena asked. Because unlike your species, Captain, the Nexary do not break their word, Zephyra replied coldly. We find deception distasteful and beneath our dignity. Elena took a deep breath. Every instinct told her this was a trap, but what choice did they really have? The alien queen had made it clear that they were outgunned and outmatched. At least this way, they had a chance, however, slim. I accept your challenge, Elena said. When do we begin? Immediately, Zephyr replied. Bring your doctor, your tactical officer, one of your Marines, and one other crew member of your choosing. Leave the rest aboard your ship. They will not be harmed as long as you attempt the trial in good faith. The screen went dark, leaving the bridge in relative darkness. Elena turned to her crew, seeing a mixture of fear, determination, and resignation in their faces. You heard her, Elena said. Chun, Kim, Rodriguez, and Sergeant Martinez, you're with me. Commander Jackson, you have the bridge. If we're not back in 24 hours. She paused, not wanting to voice the implications. We'll be back, Dr. Kim said firmly. 17 species may have failed, but none of them were human. We don't give up. It's our best and worst quality. As they prepared for transfer to the alien vessel, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into something far more dangerous than a simple test. Queen Zephyra had spoken with the confidence of someone who had seen this scenario play out many times before, always with the same result. But Elena also knew that Kim was right. Humans had a stubborn refusal to accept defeat that had carried them through impossible situations before. Perhaps it would be enough to surprise an ancient alien queen who thought she had humanity figured out. As the airlock cycled and they prepared to board the Nexary vessel, Elena whispered a silent prayer to whatever cosmic forces might be listening. They were about to face a trial designed by a species that had watched civilizations rise and fall for millennia. The odds were impossibly stacked against them, but they were human, and humans had never been particularly good at accepting impossible odds. The interior of the Nexary vessel defied every expectation Elena had formed about alien architecture. Rather than the sterile corridors and geometric designs common to most spacefaring species, the ship felt organic, almost alive. The walls curved in flowing patterns that reminded her of deep ocean currents, and they pulsed with a soft, bioluminescent glow that shifted through the spectrum from deep blue to warm amber. The electromagnetic readings are off the charts, whispered Dr. Kim as they followed their escort down the main corridor. The escort was another Nexary, similar in appearance to Queen Zephyra, but with more subdued features and clothing that suggested a military or ceremonial role. He had introduced himself as Commander Thane and had spoken only to give directions since they boarded. Sergeant Martinez kept his hand near his sidearm, though Elena suspected it would be useless against whatever technology the Nexary possessed. His eyes constantly swept their surroundings, cataloging potential threats and escape routes with professional paranoia. Stay alert, but don't provoke anything, Elena murmured to her team. We're guests here, even if unwilling ones. The corridor opened into a vast chamber that made Elena's breath catch. The ceiling soared hundreds of meters above them, supported by what looked like living trees whose branches formed intricate geometric patterns. Streams of light flowed along the branches like sap, creating an ever-shifting display of colors that was both beautiful and alien. "Welcome to the heart of our vessel," Commander Thane said, speaking for the first time since they boarded. His voice carried the same harmonic quality as the Queen's, though without the underlying menace. "The Eternal Garden has grown for over 8,000 years. Each branch represents a different species we have encountered, and each pattern of light represents their fate." "Their fate?" Rodriguez asked nervously. "Some paths lead to ascension," Thane explained, gesturing to branches that glowed with warm, golden light. "Others lead to stagnation." He pointed to branches that pulsed with steady, unchanging white light. "And some," he indicated branches that flickered with red light before going dark entirely. "Some lead to extinction." The implication was clear. Elena counted the dark branches and felt her stomach sink. There were dozens of them, representing species that had failed whatever test the Nexery had set for them. "This way," Thane continued, leading them toward a large archway that seemed to be carved from a single massive crystal. "The Queen awaits in the preparation chamber." The chamber beyond was smaller, but no less impressive. The walls were lined with what appeared to be historical records, images, artifacts, and displays showing the rise and fall of numerous civilizations. Elena noticed that the displays seemed to be organized chronologically, with the most recent ones showing scenes she recognized from human history. Queen Zephyra stood in the center of the chamber, no longer on a view screen, but in person. She was even more imposing in reality, standing nearly 3 meters tall, with a presence that seemed to fill the entire space. The crown-like protrusions from her skull were revealed to be naturally occurring bone structures, and the circuit-like patterns on her skin pulsed with a rhythm that matched her heartbeat. "Humans," she said without preamble. "Before you begin the trial, you will understand what you face. The Labyrinth of Echoes is not merely a test of courage or intelligence. It is a mirror that reflects the deepest truths about those who enter it. You will see visions of your past actions and their consequences. You will witness possible futures that await your species. Most importantly, you will face the fundamental question of what it means to be human." Dr. Kim stepped forward. "Your Majesty, can you tell us more about these visions? Are they real or symbolic representations?" "Both and neither," Zephyra replied cryptically. "The labyrinth draws from the quantum echoes that surround all living beings. Every choice creates ripples in reality, and these ripples persist long after the choice is made. The labyrinth makes these ripples visible and forces you to confront them directly." "Quantum echoes?" Rodriguez looked skeptical. "That sounds like pseudoscience." "Your understanding of quantum mechanics is primitive," Zephyra said dismissively. "You perceive reality as a single linear timeline, but existence is far more complex. Every moment contains infinite possibilities, and every choice you make shapes not only your future, but your past as well. The labyrinth reveals these hidden connections." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. "You're talking about seeing alternate timelines?" "I'm talking about seeing the truth," Zephyr corrected. "The visions you experience will be drawn from the collective unconscious of your species, the shared memories and fears that define humanity. You will see what your kind has done, what it might do, and what it should do. Whether you can accept these truths and learn from them will determine your fate." Thane gestured toward another archway, this one glowing with an internal light that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. "The entrance to the labyrinth. Once you pass through, you cannot return until you reach the center chamber, or—" He paused meaningfully. "Or until the labyrinth determines you have failed." "What happens to those who fail?" Sergeant Martinez asked bluntly. "They become part of the labyrinth," Zephyra answered. "Their consciousness is absorbed into the quantum matrix, and they experience every possible version of their failures for eternity. It is not death, but it is not life as you understand it." The team exchanged glances. Elena could see the fear in their eyes, but also determination. They had all volunteered for deep space exploration, knowing it would involve unknown dangers. This was just more unknown than they had expected. "Are there any rules or guidelines we should know about?" Elena asked. Only one, Zephyr replied. Stay together. The labyrinth will attempt to separate you, to isolate each of you with personal visions that exploit your individual weaknesses and fears. Those who face the trial alone invariably succumb to madness or despair. Your strength lies in your connections to each other. That's it. Rodriguez sounded incredulous. Just stay together? Simple to say, impossible to do, Thane observed. The labyrinth is designed to make you forget your companions exist. It will show you visions so compelling, so emotionally overwhelming, that you will lose yourself entirely. 17 species have attempted this trial. None have maintained group cohesion beyond the third chamber. Dr. Kim was taking rapid notes on her tablet. How many chambers are there in total? 7, Zephyr answered. Each one represents a different aspect of consciousness and morality. The first chamber shows personal history and the consequences of individual choices. The second reveals the hidden connections between seemingly unrelated actions. The third confronts you with the suffering your choices have caused others. The fourth forces you to witness the good you have failed to do. The fifth shows you possible futures based on current trajectory. The sixth reveals the ultimate consequences of your species' nature. And the seventh. She paused. The seventh chamber contains the choice that will determine your species' fate. Elena felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. They weren't just trying to save their own lives anymore. The fate of all humanity potentially rested on their ability to navigate this alien trial. Your Majesty, Elena said formally, we accept the challenge. But I want to make something clear. We're not just fighting for our own survival. We're fighting for the right of our species to continue growing and learning. Humanity has made mistakes, yes, but we've also created beauty, shown compassion, and demonstrated the capacity for positive change. Pretty words again, Captain, Zephyr replied coldly. The labyrinth cares nothing for words. It cares only for truth. Thane approached them carrying what appeared to be 5 small devices, each one a crystal pendant hanging from a metallic chain. These will maintain communication between you as long as you remain in the same chamber. They will also record your experiences for later analysis. Elena took one of the pendants and examined it. The crystal was warm to the touch and seemed to contain swirling patterns of light similar to those they had seen in the corridor trees. Analysis by whom? By me, Zephyr answered. If you succeed, I will review your experiences to determine whether they represent genuine growth or merely clever adaptation to the trial's parameters. The next we have seen many species attempt to game our tests. None have succeeded. As they put on the communication pendants, Elena felt a strange tingling sensation, as if something was connecting directly to her nervous system. The crystal grew warmer against her skin, and she could suddenly sense the presence of her team members more acutely than before. The pendants create a limited telepathic link, Thane explained. They will help you maintain awareness of each other, even when the visions threaten to overwhelm your individual consciousness. Elena looked at her team one final time. Dr. Kim was clearly fascinated by the technology they were about to experience, her scientific curiosity overriding her fear. Rodriguez looked nervous but determined, his fingers absently checking his equipment. Sergeant Martinez had the calm, focused expression he wore before any dangerous mission. Lieutenant Chun was pale, but steady, his analytical mind probably trying to process everything they had learned. Remember, Elena addressed her team, whatever we see in there, whatever the labyrinth shows us, we face it together. We've all made mistakes. We've all done things we regret. But we're here because we believe humanity is worth saving. Don't let the visions convince you otherwise. Human cooperation is admirable in theory, Zephyr commented, but the labyrinth has broken bonds forged by centuries of shared experience. Your team has known each other for months at most. What makes you think your connections are strong enough to survive what awaits you? Because we're human, Elena replied simply. We don't give up on each other. Queen Zephyr's expression might have shown the slightest hint of curiosity, though it was hard to tell with her alien features. We shall see, Captain. We shall see. The entrance to the labyrinth beckoned, its pulsing light seeming to match Elena's accelerated heartbeat. As they approached the threshold, she could feel a strange pressure building in the air, as if reality itself was becoming unstable. Once you pass through, Thane warned, time will flow differently. What feels like hours inside, maybe days or weeks in the outside universe. The labyrinth exists partially outside normal space-time. Elena nodded and stepped forward, her team close behind her. As they crossed the threshold, the world around them dissolved into swirling patterns of light and shadow. The last thing Elena heard was Queen Zephyr's voice, echoing strangely as if from a great distance. "Show me what makes humanity worthy of survival, Captain. Show me something I have not seen before." Then, the visions began, and Elena found herself standing in a perfect recreation of her childhood home on Earth, watching her 8-year-old self make a choice that would echo through the rest of her life. The labyrinth had begun its work, and there was no turning back. Elena watched her 8-year-old self discover the injured bird in her backyard, its wing clearly broken from a collision with the house's window. The memory was so vivid, she could smell the jasmine blooming on the fence and feel the morning dew on her bare feet. But this wasn't just a simple recollection. She could see the quantum echoes Queen Zephyra had described, rippling out from that moment like stones dropped in still water. "Elena, can you hear me?" Dr. Kim's voice came through the pendant, strangely distant despite standing right beside her. "I can hear you," Elena replied, though when she looked around, she realized her team was experiencing their own visions. Rodriguez was staring at what appeared to be an empty wall, his face contorted with anguish. Jim was backing away from something only he could see, his hands raised defensively. Martinez stood at attention, as if receiving orders from an invisible superior. "We need to focus," Elena called out, forcing herself to look away from the painful scene of her younger self, trying to save the bird that would die anyway. "Remember what they told us about staying together." But even as she spoke, she felt the pull of the vision intensifying. The quantum echoes around that childhood moment were becoming clearer, showing her how her decision to carefully nurse the bird for 3 days before it finally died had shaped her entire approach to life. The futile but necessary attempt to save something fragile and beautiful had taught her that some things were worth fighting for even when victory was impossible. "I can see the connections," Dr. Kim whispered, her scientific mind apparently better equipped to process what they were experiencing. "Every choice creates branching possibilities. The labyrinth is showing us how individual moments ripple across entire lifetimes." Elena forced herself to step away from her childhood memory and moved toward Rodriguez, who was now sobbing openly. As she approached, she caught glimpses of his vision, a teenage boy refusing to help his younger brother with homework because he was too busy playing video games. The quantum echoes showed how that moment of selfishness had contributed to his brother's academic struggles, which led to dropout, which led to drug addiction, which led to— "It's not real," Elena said firmly, grabbing Rodriguez's shoulder. "These are possibilities, not certainties. Your brother is alive and, well, and working as a teacher in Mexico City." Rodriguez looked at her with desperate eyes. "But it could have happened. If I had just helped him that one time. Then maybe things would have been different," Elena agreed. "Or maybe he would have failed anyway and blamed you for not helping enough. The labyrinth is showing you guilt, not truth. Don't let it consume you." As she pulled Rodriguez away from his vision, Elena noticed they were no longer in the first chamber. Somehow, without realizing it, they had moved into a space that looked like the bridge of their own ship, but wrong in subtle ways. The consoles were arranged differently. The crew uniforms were unfamiliar, and through the view screen, she could see Earth burning. "Second chamber," Chen announced, his voice hollow. "Hidden connections and unintended consequences." The vision crystallized around them with horrifying clarity. They were witnessing an alternate timeline where their current mission had gone differently. Instead of encountering Queen Zephyra, they had discovered an abandoned Nexury outpost and salvaged advanced technology from it. The knowledge gained from that technology had accelerated human development by centuries, but it had also made humanity incredibly dangerous. Elena watched in horror as human fleets armed with Nexury weapons spread across the galaxy like a plague, exactly as Zephyra had accused them of doing. Species after species fell before human expansion, until finally, a coalition of ancient civilizations decided that humanity needed to be stopped permanently. The burning Earth on the view screen was the result. Complete annihilation of human civilization as punishment for their cosmic crimes. "This isn't our timeline," Sergeant Martinez said firmly, though his voice carried doubt. We didn't take any alien technology. We're not conquerors, aren't we? The voice that answered wasn't from any of their team. Elena turned to see another version of herself, wearing the uniform of a colonial admiral, her face hard and scarred from countless battles. In my timeline, we told ourselves the same lies. We said we were explorers, defenders, peacekeepers. But every world we protected became a human colony. Every species we helped became our servants. You're not real, Elena said, but even as she spoke, she could feel the truth in the vision. Humanity's track record in space was far from perfect. How many indigenous species have been displaced by human settlements? How many ecosystems have been altered to support human life? Real is relative, the Admiral Elena replied coldly. I am what you could become, given the right circumstances. I am the logical endpoint of human ambition. Dr. Kim stepped forward, her scientific training helping her maintain objectivity even in the face of such disturbing visions. The labyrinth is showing us worst-case scenarios to test our reactions. It wants to see if we'll be crushed by guilt or if we'll learn from these possibilities. Learning requires accepting responsibility, Admiral Elena countered. Your species excels at finding excuses for its failures, but struggles to acknowledge its fundamental nature. You are predators pretending to be herbivores. Then, explain the bird, Elena said suddenly, drawing on the memory from the first chamber. Explain why an 8-year-old human child would spend 3 days caring for a creature that couldn't benefit her in any way. Explain why humans risk their lives to save strangers, why they create art that serves no survival purpose, why they mourn the extinction of species they've never seen. Admiral Elena's expression flickered with something that might have been uncertainty. Anomalies, evolutionary quirks that will be bred out as the species matures, or fundamental aspects of what makes us human, Elena replied. She looked around at her team, seeing them struggling with their own dark visions. Rodriguez was arguing with a version of himself that wore the uniform of a corporate security officer, apparently from a timeline where he had chosen profit over principles. Chun was facing a future version of himself that had become a dictator, ruling Earth through technological surveillance and manipulation. Martinez was watching alternate reality human soldiers committing atrocities on alien worlds. We have to move, Elena announced. These visions are designed to trap us in self-doubt and recrimination. The labyrinth wants us to believe that human nature is fundamentally flawed beyond redemption. Maybe it is, Rodriguez said quietly. Maybe Zephyra is right about us. Then, we prove her wrong, Elena replied firmly. Not by denying our capacity for evil, but by choosing to do better despite it. As they forced themselves to move deeper into the chamber, the visions shifted again. Now they were seeing the positive impacts of their choices, the quantum echoes of kindness and compassion rippling outward through time. Elena saw how her childhood experience with the bird had led her to choose a career in space exploration rather than the military, which had led to peaceful first contact with 3 different species. Rodriguez witnessed how his decision to study engineering instead of business had resulted in safer life support systems that had saved thousands of colonists' lives. Chin saw how his analytical approach to problem-solving had prevented a war between Earth and the Martian colonies. The labyrinth shows both sides, Dr. Kim observed. The capacity for destruction and the capacity for creation. It's testing whether we can accept both aspects of our nature without being paralyzed by guilt or inflated by pride. But as they entered the 3rd chamber, Elena realized the real test was just beginning. This new space was filled with the faces of those who had suffered because of human actions, not just their own personal choices, but the collective decisions of their entire species. Extinct alien races gazed at them with accusation in their eyes. Displaced indigenous peoples wept for lost homeworlds. Children from worlds ravaged by human-caused environmental disasters reached out with skeletal hands. This is where most species fail, Admiral Elena said, still following them like a dark reflection. They see the suffering they've caused and either deny responsibility or collapse under the weight of guilt. Neither response leads to growth. Sergeant Martinez was the first to break. Seeing the faces of civilians who had died in human military actions, some of which he had personally participated in, he felt his knees and began weeping. We're monsters, he whispered. How do we live with ourselves knowing what we've done? The The same way any species lives with its history, Elena answered, though her own voice was shaking. The visions of human-caused suffering were overwhelming, and she could feel her team's unity beginning to fracture under the emotional assault. By acknowledging the harm, making amends where possible, and committing to do better. Easy words, Rodriguez said bitterly, staring at the images of environmental devastation caused by human industrial expansion. But how do we make amends to species that are extinct? How do we restore worlds that are dead? Dr. Kim was studying the visions with scientific detachment, though tears streamed down her face. We can't, she said simply. But we can prevent future extinctions. We can restore other worlds. We can ensure that the suffering we see here doesn't happen again. Can we? Shin asked desperately. Or are we doomed to repeat these patterns forever? Maybe Zephyra is right. Maybe humanity should be stopped before we do more damage. Elena felt panic rising in her chest as she watched her team's morale collapse. The labyrinth was succeeding in breaking them down, just as it had broken 17 other species. But then she remembered something Zephyra had said about humans being different from other species she had encountered. Look at us, Elena said suddenly. Look at what we're doing right now. We're in a chamber designed to make us confront the worst aspects of our species. And what's our reaction? Guilt, remorse, a desperate desire to make things right. How many truly evil species would respond this way? Guilt doesn't erase the damage, Admiral Elena countered. No, but it shows that we're capable of moral growth, Elena replied. A species that felt no guilt about its harmful actions would be truly dangerous. Our guilt is evidence of our conscience. She moved to help Martinez stand, feeling the weight of all the suffering they had witnessed. The labyrinth isn't just showing us humanity's crimes. It's showing us our capacity for moral recognition. We don't excuse our failures or deny our responsibility. We face them head-on and use them as motivation to do better. As her team slowly pulled themselves together, Elena realized they were changing. The visions of suffering hadn't broken them. They had forged them into something stronger. Each member of her crew now carried the full weight of human responsibility, but also the full awareness of human potential for growth. The fourth chamber, Dr. Kim announced as the space around them shifted once again. The good we have failed to do. This was perhaps the most painful chamber yet because it showed them not active evil, but passive indifference. Opportunities for kindness that had been missed, chances to help that had been ignored, moments when they could have made a difference but had chosen the easier path instead. Elena saw herself walking past a homeless veteran on the streets of New Angeles, too focused on her career to stop and help. She watched Rodriguez ignore his elderly neighbor's request for assistance with her groceries because he was late for a date. She witnessed Chun fail to speak up when a colleague was being treated unfairly, choosing to protect his own position rather than defend someone else. But alongside these personal failures, they saw the larger failures of their species. Resources that could have been used to help developing worlds being spent on military expansion instead. Technologies that could have solved hunger and disease being kept secret for competitive advantage. Knowledge that could have prevented disasters being ignored because it was inconvenient for economic interests. This is the cruelest chamber, Admiral Elena observed, because it shows you that your failures aren't just mistakes or moral weaknesses. They're choices. Every moment you chose not to help someone was a moment you chose yourself over others. But it also shows us we have the power to choose differently, Elena replied, though the weight of missed opportunities was almost crushing. Every failure to act is also evidence that we could have acted. Capability implies responsibility. As they struggled through the visions of squandered opportunities and ignored suffering, Elena began to understand what the labyrinth was really testing. It wasn't just their ability to face hard truths about themselves. It was their willingness to take responsibility for the future, knowing the full cost of both action and inaction. The fifth chamber approaches, Dr. Kim warned, and Elena braced herself for whatever new trial awaited them. They had survived personal guilt, hidden connections, direct harm, and missed opportunities. But she had a feeling the worst was yet to come. The fifth chamber materialized around them like a cosmic observatory, its walls displaying countless possible futures stretching out from the present moment like branches of an infinite tree. Each branch showed a different path humanity might take, and Elena quickly realized that the overwhelming majority led to darkness. Behold your species' potential trajectories, Admiral Elena announced, her voice carrying a note of grim satisfaction. Based on current patterns of behavior, cultural values, and decision-making processes, Elena stared in horror at the nearest vision stream. In this future, humanity had become a galactic empire built on the subjugation of dozens of alien species. Human overlords ruled from magnificent city worlds while enslaved populations toiled in mines and factories across hundreds of systems. The technological advancement was impressive, but the moral cost was staggering. That's only one possibility, Dr. Kim protested, though her voice lacked conviction. These are just projections based on current trends. Highly accurate projections, Admiral Elena corrected. The Nexari have observed the development patterns of over 300 species across 50,000 years. They have learned to predict civilizational trajectories with remarkable precision. Rodriguez was staring at another branch of the future tree, this one showing humanity's expansion grinding to a halt as they depleted the resources of every world they colonized. Vast fleets of refugee ships wander the galaxy, searching for new worlds to consume, leaving behind a trail of dead systems and extinct ecosystems. How many of these futures show positive outcomes? Chen asked quietly. Elena forced herself to examine the entire display, counting the branches that glowed with warm, positive light compared to those that flickered with red warning signals or faded to black entirely. The ratio was heartbreakingly small, less than 3%, she admitted. Out of thousands of possible futures, only a handful show humanity becoming a positive force in a galaxy. And what do those positive futures have in common? Dr. Kim asked, her scientific mind automatically looking for patterns. Elena studied the bright branches more carefully. In each one, humanity had faced a major crisis that forced fundamental changes in their approach to expansion and development. Sometimes it was environmental collapse on Earth. Sometimes it was a devastating war with another species. Sometimes it was internal revolution against corrupt leadership. Crisis, Elena realized. In every positive timeline, humanity is forced to confront its destructive tendencies and make radical changes. External pressure leading to evolutionary adaptation. Admiral Elena agreed. Your species only grows when forced to. Left to your own devices, you invariably choose the path of least resistance, which leads to dominion and destruction. Sergeant Martinez had found a particularly disturbing branch of the tree, one that showed human civilization fragmenting into competing factions that eventually turned their advanced weapons on each other. The visions showed Earth itself cracked open like an egg, its molten core spilling out into space as the final human fleets destroyed each other in the ruins of their homeworld. We're our own worst enemy, Martinez said bleakly. Even when we don't destroy others, we destroy ourselves. But look at this one, Rodriguez called out, pointing to one of the rare positive branches. In this timeline, humanity had encountered an alien species that challenged their fundamental assumptions about power and dominance. Instead of trying to conquer or compete, humans had learned to cooperate, eventually becoming part of a galactic confederation based on mutual aid and shared knowledge. The encounter with the Nexari, Elena breathed, understanding suddenly. This trial isn't just about judgment. It's about creating one of those crisis moments that could push humanity toward a positive future. Clever deduction, Captain, Admiral Elena said mockingly. But recognizing the opportunity doesn't mean you'll succeed in taking it. The labyrinth has shown dozens of species their positive potential futures. None were able to achieve them. As they moved deeper into the chamber, the future visions became more personal, showing them their own potential fates based on the choices they made in the next few hours. Elena saw herself as an old woman, honored as the captain who made first contact with a benevolent alien species and ushered in a new age of interstellar cooperation. But she also saw herself dying alone in a prison cell, blamed for starting a war that consumed half the galaxy. The weight of individual choices, Dr. Kim observed. Every decision we make here echoes across centuries. No pressure, Rodriguez muttered, but Elena could hear the determination building in his voice. The overwhelming nature of the visions was actually having the opposite effect than intended. Instead of paralyzing them with the magnitude of potential consequences, it was focusing their resolve. We're in the sixth chamber now, Chen announced as the space around them shifted once again. This new environment was stark and Simple, just a plain room with 5 chairs arranged in a circle. But Elena could feel the weight of cosmic attention pressing down on them like a physical force. The Chamber of Ultimate Consequences, Admiral Elena explained. Here you will witness the final result of your species' fundamental nature, stripped of all excuses and rationalization. What appeared before them was not a vision, but a trial. Sitting in the chairs were 5 beings that Elena slowly recognized as idealized versions of themselves. What they could become if they embraced the absolute best aspects of their humanity. These alternate selves radiated wisdom, compassion, and moral clarity that made the real versions feel crude and unfinished by comparison. "We are who you could be," the idealized Elena said, her voice carrying harmonics of authority and kindness that made the real Elena's chest ache with longing. "We represent human potential at its absolute peak, the version of your species that could take its place among the great civilizations of the galaxy." "But you're not us," the real Rodriguez replied. "You're fantasies, idealized projections. We are possibilities," the idealized Rodriguez corrected gently. "We exist in the quantum foam of potential, waiting for the choices that could bring us into reality. Every human has the capacity to become what we represent." The idealized Dr. Kim leaned forward, her eyes bright with infinite curiosity tempered by perfect wisdom. "The question is whether your species will choose growth or comfort, challenge or stagnation, service or selfishness. The Nexari have watched civilizations make this choice again and again. Most choose the easy path. What about the ones that didn't?" Elena asked. "You said dozens of species have failed this trial, but what about the few that succeeded?" Admiral Elena's expression flickered with something that might have been uncertainty. "There have been anomalies. 3 species in 50,000 years have passed the labyrinth and earned Nexari protection rather than judgment." "Protection?" Sergeant Martinez looked surprised. "I thought this was about avoiding extinction." "The Nexari don't just eliminate dangerous species," the idealized Chun explained. "They also guide and protect species that demonstrate genuine wisdom and moral growth. Those who pass the labyrinth become part of the Nexari network, sharing knowledge and resources across the galaxy while maintaining their independence." Elena felt a spark of hope. What did those 3 species have in common? What allowed them to succeed where others failed? "They chose growth over survival," the idealized Elena answered. "When faced with the final choice, they were willing to sacrifice their immediate interest for the greater good of all sentient life." "The 7th chamber," Admiral Elena said, her voice carrying a note of finality. "The choice that determines everything." The simple room faded away, replaced by a vast space that seemed to contain the entire universe. Stars wheeled overhead in impossible configurations, and Elena could sense the presence of countless civilizations, some thriving, some struggling, some already extinct. At the center of the space stood Queen Zephyra, but she was no longer the angry, imperious figure they had first encountered. Here, she appeared as she truly was, ancient, weary, and burdened by the responsibility of judging entire species. "You have seen the truth of your nature," Zephyra said, her voice echoing across cosmic distances. "The capacity for both creation and destruction, the potential for wisdom and folly, the choice between growth and stagnation. Now you must make the decision that will determine your species' fate." "What choice?" Elena asked, though she suspected she already knew. "Simple," Zephyr replied. "You can return to your ship and continue humanity's expansion as before, knowing what you now know about your potential futures. You will live, your crew will live, your species will continue its current trajectory." Or, she gestured, and Elena saw an alternative that made her heart stop. A device appeared before them, clearly of Nexari construction, pulsing with the same quantum energy that powered the labyrinth. "You can choose to sacrifice yourselves to send a warning to your species," Zephyra continued. "This device will transmit everything you have experienced in the labyrinth directly to Earth's leadership. They will see the visions, understand the consequences of humanity's current path, and have the opportunity to choose differently. But the transmission will consume your life force. You will die to give your species a chance at wisdom." Elena felt the weight of the choice crushing down on her. Save themselves and hope humanity would stumble toward enlightenment on its own, or sacrifice their lives to give their species a real chance at positive change. There's a third option, Dr. Kim said suddenly. What if we could find a way to transmit the information without dying? Use our own technology combined with Nexary quantum principles. Zephyr's expression showed something that might have been admiration. Always looking for the alternative solution. Very human of you, Dr. Kim. But some choices cannot be avoided or engineered around. The device requires a conscious sacrifice to function. This is not a matter of technology, but of moral commitment. Elena looked at her team, seeing her own thoughts reflected in their faces. They had come so far, learned so much, grown so much. The idea of dying now, just when they finally understood what humanity could become, was almost unbearable. But the idea of humanity continuing down its current path, knowing what they now knew about the likely consequences, was even worse. If we make this sacrifice, Elena asked, what guarantee do we have that humanity will make the right choices? None, Zephyr admitted. Free will means the freedom to choose wrongly, even with perfect knowledge. But you'll have given them the tools they need to choose wisely. The rest is up to them. Elena closed her eyes and thought about the visions they had seen, the possible futures, the suffering their species might cause, the potential for growth and positive change. She thought about the idealized versions of themselves they had encountered, representing everything humanity could become. When she opened her eyes, she found her team looking at her with calm acceptance. They had all reached the same conclusion. We choose sacrifice, Elena said simply. Humanity deserves a chance to choose its future with full knowledge of the consequences. Queen Zephyra nodded slowly, and for the first time, Elena saw respect in her alien features. 18 species have faced this choice. Seventeen choses survived. You are the second to choose sacrifice for the greater good. What happened to the first? Rodriguez asked. They became Nexary, Zephyra replied, and Elena suddenly understood everything. The revelation hit Elena like a physical blow. The Nexary, this ancient, powerful species that had been judging other civilizations for millennia, had once faced the same choice her team was making now. They had chosen to sacrifice themselves for the greater good, and in doing so, had been transformed into something greater than they had been before. The Nexary were once a young species like humanity, Zephyra continued, her voice carrying the weight of eons. We faced our own trial 50,000 years ago, presented by an even more ancient race that has since passed beyond the physical realm. We chose sacrifice, and in that choice we found transcendence. Dr. Kim's scientific mind was reeling with the implications. The quantum device doesn't just transmit information. It transforms consciousness itself. You're offering us the chance to become something more than human. Not more than human, Zephyra corrected gently. More fully human. The sacrifice strips away everything that is petty, selfish, and limited, leaving only the highest aspirations and noblest qualities of your species. You would become what humanity could be at its absolute best. Elena looked around at her team, seeing wonder and fear in equal measure. The prospect of transcendence was tempting, but it was also terrifying. They would cease to be themselves as they understood themselves, becoming instead idealized representatives of human potential. What about our families, our lives, our individual dreams and ambitions? Rodriguez asked, his voice thick with emotion. They would become part of a larger purpose, Zephyra replied. Your consciousness would expand to encompass the welfare of all sentient beings. Personal concerns would not disappear, but would be transformed into cosmic responsibility. You would become guardians and guides, helping other species navigate the same choices you have faced. Sergeant Martinez stepped forward, his military bearing evident even in this impossible situation. Ma'am, permission to speak freely? Elena almost laughed at the formality, given their circumstances. Granted, Sergeant. This is what we signed up for when we joined the exploration service, Martinez said simply. Maybe not exactly this, but the possibility of giving our lives so that others could benefit from what we learned. It's an honor to have the chance to die for something that matters this much. She nodded slowly. The utilitarian calculus is clear. 5 lives to potentially save billions, maybe trillions of future lives across the galaxy. The math makes the choice obvious. It's not just about math, Dr. Kim added. It's about becoming part of something larger than ourselves. How many people get the chance to literally transcend their limitations and become forces for good in the universe? Elena felt a strange calm settling over her. The fear was still there, but it was overshadowed by a sense of rightness, of purpose fulfilled. Before we make this final commitment, I want to understand something. Why did you present yourself as our enemy initially? The anger, the hostility, the threats? Zephyr's alien features shifted into what might have been a sad smile. Because that is what your species expected to encounter. You came into our space armed and ready for conflict. Had I presented myself as benevolent from the beginning, you would have been suspicious, defensive. You needed to believe you were fighting for your survival in order to discover what you were truly willing to sacrifice. The whole trial was designed around our psychological makeup, Elena realized. You studied humanity long enough to understand exactly how to push us toward growth. Every species is different, Zephyr confirmed. The trial adapts to the fundamental nature of those who take it. For humanity, it had to be about choice and sacrifice because those are the qualities that define your greatest potential. Admiral Elena, who had been silent during this exchange, finally spoke. You still have time to reconsider. Choose life. Choose to return to your ship and try to guide humanity toward wisdom through conventional means. The path of sacrifice is irrevocable. Elena looked at her dark reflection and shook her head. You represent the path of choosing self-interest over principle. We've seen where that leads. No, we've made our choice. She approached the quantum device, feeling its power thrumming through the air around it. The mechanism was beautiful in its alien way, crystalline structures arranged in patterns that seemed to shift and flow like living music. Touching, it would begin the transformation process, converting their life force and consciousness into a transmission that would carry their experiences directly to Earth. Together, Elena asked, extending her hand toward the device. Her team moved to join her, each placing a hand on different parts of the mechanism. The moment they made contact, Elena felt the transformation beginning. It wasn't painful exactly, but it was overwhelming. She could feel her individual consciousness beginning to expand, connecting not just with her teammates, but with something vast and cosmic. The visions of the labyrinth flowed through all of them simultaneously, but now they experienced them not as personal trials, but as universal truths about the nature of consciousness, choice, and moral growth. Elena understood that these experiences would be transmitted to humanity's leaders not as abstract concepts, but as lived reality, allowing them to truly comprehend the consequences of their civilization's choices. We're really doing this, Rodriguez whispered, his voice already taking on the harmonic qualities they had heard in Nexary's speech. No regrets, Chin added, his analytical mind marveling at the transformation process even as he underwent it. For humanity, Martinez declared, his soldiers' discipline holding steady even as his consciousness expanded beyond anything he had ever imagined. For all sentient life, Dr. Kim corrected gently, her scientific wonder encompassing the cosmic scope of their sacrifice. Elena felt her individual identity dissolving and reforming, but rather than loss, she experienced it as liberation. The petty fears, the personal ambitions, the small hurts, and grievances that had defined her human existence were not destroyed, but transformed into wisdom and compassion. She was becoming something greater while remaining fundamentally herself. The transmission began, and Elena could sense it racing across space toward Earth at speeds that transcended light itself. The quantum entanglement that connected all consciousness allowed their experiences to arrive instantaneously, bypassing the normal limitations of physics. On Earth, she knew, the leaders of humanity were suddenly experiencing everything the team had gone through in the labyrinth. They were seeing the possible futures, understanding the consequences of their choices, feeling the weight of responsibility for their species' development. The transmission wouldn't just inform them. It would fundamentally change their perspective, giving them the wisdom needed to guide humanity toward a positive future. It is done, Zephyra announced, her voice filled with something that sounded like pride. The message has been received and understood. Humanity's leaders are already beginning to implement changes based on what they have learned. Elena's transformed consciousness could perceive the changes beginning on Earth and throughout human space. Emergency sessions were being called. Military expansion was being halted. Resources were being redirected toward environmental restoration and humanitarian aid. The transformation wasn't complete. It would take generations for humanity to fully embrace its potential. But the foundation had been laid. "Welcome to the Nexery," Zephyra said formally. "You're no longer Elena Vasquez, Rodriguez, Chun, Kim, and Martinez. You are the human guardian, the first of your species to join our cosmic fellowship." Elena, now something more than Elena, felt her new identity settling into place. She could perceive the network of consciousness that connected all the Nexery, former members of dozens of species who had made the same choice across the millennia. Each brought their unique perspectives and capabilities to the collective, creating a wisdom that was greater than the sum of its parts. "What happens now? The entity that had been DR?" Kim asked, though the question came from all of them simultaneously. "Now you help guide the next species that faces the trial," Zephyra explained. "Your understanding of human psychology and growth will be invaluable in helping other young civilizations navigate their own development." The cosmic cycle continues. The human guardian could already sense another species approaching the critical point in their development, a collective of aquatic beings whose expansion was threatening the delicate ecosystems of their star system. They would need guidance, patience, and the wisdom that could only come from others who had faced similar choices. But first, there was work to be done with humanity itself. The transmission had provided the knowledge needed for positive change, but implementing that change would require ongoing support and guidance. The human guardian would need to find subtle ways to influence human development without violating the principle of free will that was fundamental to true growth. The Prometheus, the human guardian realized, speaking with the combined voices of 5 people who had become something greater. "Our ship and crew are still waiting. They will be told that you died heroically trying to establish peaceful relations with an alien species," Zephyra assured them. "It is, after all, the truth. Your human selves did die. They died to give birth to something immeasurably greater." The human guardian felt a moment of sadness for the lives they had given up, the families who would mourn them, the dreams that would never be fulfilled in the conventional sense. But that sadness was quickly overwhelmed by the vast sense of purpose and possibility that came with their new existence. They could perceive the quantum echoes of their choice rippling outward through time and space. Humanity would grow and change, eventually taking its place among the great civilizations of the galaxy. Other species would be guided away from destructive paths. The cosmic community would be strengthened by each new addition, each unique perspective adding to the collective wisdom of sentient life. Queen Zephyra, the human guardian, said formally, "We accept our new role and responsibilities. Humanity chose the right path after all." Zephyra's expression showed something that transcended species barriers, the look of a teacher whose student has finally understood a crucial lesson. "Yes," she agreed. "They chose growth over survival, sacrifice over selfishness, wisdom over comfort. It is what makes them worthy of joining the cosmic community." As the human guardians settled into their new existence, they could feel the presence of countless other civilizations spread across the galaxy, each at different stages of development, each facing their own challenges and choices. Some would succeed and ascend to cosmic consciousness. Others would fail and face extinction. But for each one that chose wisely, the universe became a little brighter, a little more hopeful. The trial was over, but the real work was just beginning. The human guardian had eternity to help guide the galaxy toward wisdom, and they embraced that destiny with all the determination and optimism that had always defined humanity at its best. In the end, Captain Elena Vasquez and her crew had done exactly what they set out to do. They had made first contact with an alien species and established a foundation for peaceful relations. They had just done it in a way that none of them could have imagined when they first set out among the stars. The wrathful alien queen's challenge had been met, and humanity had proven itself worthy of survival and growth. The path forward would be difficult, but it was a path toward transcendence, and that made all the sacrifice worthwhile.